I'm Lauren Lando. Welcome to ESS Roundtable Discussion. Today I have Patrick McHenry with me. He is currently the strength and conditioning coach at Castleview High School, and he also sits on the board of directors for the NSCA. Patrick's been involved with the NSCA for a very, very long time, and it's an absolute honor to have him here today and a privilege, and to be able to give you the insight to a strength and conditioning coach on the high school level, his perspectives, his challenges, and talk a little bit about what his day-to-day is. So Patrick, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here today.
So I gave a little introduction. Why don't you give us a little bit more of a rundown of your career path?
Okay. I kind of have a unique career in the fact that I started out as a teacher and then realized quickly that I wanted to be in the strength and conditioning field. So I went back, I got my CSCS, became a level 1 Olympic lifting coach, and then started just working at different high schools as a football coach and a strength coach. And then in 2000, I was actually hired as a full-time strength coach at a high school. And it's kind of a unique job because I have the weight room before school from 6 to 7 in the morning, where we have kids come in or teams come in. And then I teach weightlifting only classes. And then I have the weight room open after school, where any team can come in or kids can come in. And then we also have a summer program where we work with kids.
Well, that becomes a year-round job at that point.
Yes, it does. Yep.
Let me ask you this. So I'm an incoming freshman. Mm-hmm. What is the evaluation process that you do with your athletes? They're pretty loud today.
Well, one of the first things we do is we orient them to the room. We want to make them feel comfortable, whether it's male, female, it doesn't matter what sport they do. We want them to understand that they're in this room to become better, and that it's not just about how much you lift, but how well you move. And my goal is that we're trying to make you better if you want to go on and play college sports. Now, realistically, probably 80 to 90% of our kids don't go and play college sports. But the rest of your life you can work out. And that's kind of the running joke. I always tell them that even at my age, you can still work out. Whether it's going out and playing Frisbee golf like you did today with some of your athletes.
High athletic adventure for me.
There you go. Or rock climbing, rollerblading. It doesn't matter what you want to do. These are things that they learn as kids, they can continue on as adults.
Well, and that's awesome because that follows that LTAD model where we talk about active for life. Yep. And like you said, 80 to 90% of these kids will not go on and play college sports. However, now they have the template to be able to continue, the exercise and fitness routines that you set up for them. So now, hats off to you, because there are plenty of high schools that do not have a strength and conditioning coach, and I see them in here. And it's really tough to watch sometimes when you get them under the squat rack. You have them say, okay, show me what your clean looks like, and you can't believe that they're actually doing these things loaded. So having a strength and conditioning coach who is ultimately in charge of creating and planning the curriculum for these kids, absolutely awesome job. And
thank you.
It's hats off to you, because those kids are getting such a skill set that these other kids are missing out on that would ultimately help them with their on-field performance. So let me ask you this. So how do you as the strength and conditioning coach communicate with the sports specific coaches? Do you have pretty good communication with them?
Oh, it's actually great because our coaches will sit down and talk to us. Basketball coach came in this week. We're actually on spring break next week. So he sat down and said, look, when we get back from spring break, this is what we want to do. Mm-hmm. And he and I sat down, we built out the program, so they're going to come and see me part of the time. And then as soon as they're done with me, they'll go in and they'll do their basketball, because they start doing some off-season basketball training. State championship was last weekend. And then they're going to go through and get ready for the summertime. After summertime, they'll do a little bit of fall ball, and basketball season starts again.
Wow. Just going.
Yes.
And then with that, what would you say some of the hard part, like if I'm a young upcoming strength and conditioning coach and I want to get into the high school sector, what are some of the things that would help you alleviate some pitfalls, some things that you maybe weren't aware of that could become problematic as a young strength and conditioning coach in the high school setting?
One of the problems is you have to be a licensed teacher. When I first got my job, you had to be a CSCS and you had to be a Colorado licensed teacher. A lot of college guys applied, and because they were CSCS, but they didn't have their teaching certificate. Mm-hmm. A lot of teachers applied, but they didn't have the CSCS. So you have to have the combination of both. And then the other one is you have to talk to the athletic director and the coaches, because really I work on everybody's staff, and that's one thing that we really stress. I am part of Palms, I am part of golf, I'm part of swimming, I'm part of football, wrestling, baseball, basketball. I'm part of all their staffs. So that's part of the athletic director said, look, You need to be in the weight room. These people will come in. The coach comes in, sees what's okay, that's good. You know, lacrosse coach comes in, looks around. Great, and then he can go out and plan, or she can go out and plan. So you have to be flexible, and you have to be able to work with anybody at any time, and just be willing to understand that there's a lot of different things going on. How do you make it all fit together?
Right, and you know, I had Gene Coleman on here before, and we talked about, you know, some of the things that he would prepare a young practitioner for, and he said one of the best words was adapt. And how do you adapt to what it is that you know, you may go out and watch practice and go, oh my gosh, the coach just ran the heck out of them. Now I need to change and modify my volume. You may have your beautiful template, your programming, but now you have to modify based on what you've seen. Do you get out to the sport practices and do a little sport modeling yourself, or is are your times too constrained to do that?
I get to go out and see the games, but I don't get to go see the practices. So a lot of times, but I will do a lot of feedback with the kids. One of my new favorite tools is Joel Rather from the Mammoth taught me how to use the finger tap test. And so on Monday, I'll have the kids do the finger tap test, and they'll keep track of their scores. They'll do it again on Friday. Well, if they're coming in and I see that their score's kind of low, then we're going to back off a little bit, and a lot of talking with the kids. Communication is huge. You have to be able to talk with the kids all the time. What was your practice like last night? And sometimes I have them, they know enough about the way I work. Kids will come in and say, Coach, I need to foam roll today. And so sometimes they'll come in and they'll just start foam rolling before we even start class.
Right.
But it's that talking with the kids, talking with the coaches, so we're all on the same page.
Yeah, it's funny, we talk about all the different diagnostic tests out there. We can do the tap test. I love the tap test. Quick, easy, you know, kids will do it.
Oh yeah, they love that one.
Yeah, they love to compete with it. But at the end of the day, your eyes, your ears are the best tool going. And so to your point, I love that, where, you know, you have to pay attention, you have to communicate with them, because that's the biggest part. Now, you know, we talk about strength and conditioning and what we can do on the on-the-field performance side of things. Talk to me a little bit maybe about what you've seen in your school. You've been at this school for how long now?
I've been there for 7 years now.
Okay, 7 years. What have you seen from an injury reduction side of things?
It's amazing to look at the number of, you can't never say nobody's going to get hurt. That's impossible. But we can actually see the number of injuries that are not occurring, and that if a student does get hurt, then they're recovering faster. As far as actual numbers, I'd have to look at the athletic trainer, but I get reports from him. He tells me how many times he's had to tape a team. He's told me how many games that they've missed, how many practices they've missed, how many times they come in for ice. So I get those reports, and he and I sit down at the end of the season, and we'll talk with the sport coach. If we do have something that's going on, why is that happening? Did they incorporate something different into their practice? Okay, then how can we adjust that to make sure that we prevent this? Concussions are huge. So those are the kind of things that we have to start really paying attention to the data. And that's that athletic training piece. He talks to me, and then we all talk together with the sport coach.
Awesome, awesome. And I guess with that athletic trainer perspective, what do you find as the best kind of screen that you do for all your sports around? Everybody has a different, you know, type of evaluation that they do from a quantifiable standpoint, but what do you do from a quantifiable and qualifiable when you're looking at injury risk?
One of my favorite is the FMS.
Okay.
The athletic trainers, he is Y balance and FMS. I have my FMS certification as well. It's one of those that it's very easy to do. In fact, we've kind of taken some from Athlete's Body, which is the original book before FMS book came out, and it allows me to use a class. I may have 30, 40 kids in a class. I can go through and set them up in the weight room or set them up in the gym, and I can start taking them through some of the very basic tests, getting a good idea. Uh-oh, I'm seeing this. Okay, now, you know what? I need to see you more, or I'll talk to the kids to come in on their own time, and that way I can take them through a formal test. But just that basic, okay, let's see what you look like when you squat. Let's see what you look like when you lunge. Let's see what you look like when you do your push-ups. Yeah. Then we go from there.
Yeah, the basic patterns, and then you know yourself if it's negligent to load that pattern now. If you don't see what you want to see in that screen, I've got to believe that there's not many high schools, at least in our area, that are implementing the FMS at this point in time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd say one of my favorite was BYU. Their strength coach actually FMS every athlete at BYU. And so he does the FMS official screen with every athlete, and he set up the way he's going to take them through their stretching routine. So if your score was this, then you three are on this stretching routine. Smart. You three are on this one, you three. And that was, Casey Bond was the one that was talking about, hey, this guy does it, you should try it, look what happens.
Yeah, and that's just it, because now you look at this approach where we always talk about wanting to have an individualized approach for training. However, a lot of times we won't screen, we don't screen, or if we do screen, everybody gets lumped in the same categories. So it's nice to be able to sit there and say, well, I see a restriction here, I see a lack of strength here, I see a lack of control here. And so you can sit there and say, this person needs to work on more mobility, this person needs to work on, just purely better strength, this person needs to work on neuromuscular re-education, coordinative patterns. A lot of cool things that you can do to make it more individualized.
Yep.
So I've got to ask you this as well. Okay, there's a little bit of bias here. What is your most favorite sport to work with and why?
That's kind of a toss-up because each one has their own, no offense, but football linemen are the best. And I know this might irritate some people, but they're usually the chubby kid that the big kid walking around, maybe a little bit goofy. They're not going to get the recognition that the quarterback is or the running back. So linemen as a whole are just those fun kids that work hard. Then you look at wrestlers and, 6 o'clock in the morning, the wrestlers are in there and they're just going full steam. So that one's, I think I'd have to go with those.
Yeah,
those two
the
sports.
grinder, the work hard.
They're not the pretty boy strutting around school that they get all the glory. They're just the kind of the hard-nosed kid that walks around. Then again, you have to start look at some of these volleyball girls. Yeah. They work their tail off, and it's one of those sports that it's getting more and more recognition. But that's another fun sport.
Well, that's just it. I mean, you're such a diversity, and you brought it up earlier. But when we look at palms and cheer, look at the things that they do from an athletic standpoint. I would put those up against any sport as far as athletic quality, athletic ability, and need of training. Now, how fun is that? Are they a pretty unique group to work?
Actually, it's funny you said that because I'm working out with the Palms team. I thought, you know what? I have a great stretching routine from that Athlete's Bodies and Balance. Great routine. I've taken some kids through it, and they're just complaining about how hard it is. I took my Palms team through it, and they're like, I thought we were going to go through a hard stretching.
I thought we were going to stretch.
And they were laughing at me. And I'm trying to take them through this routine, and everything we were doing, they were like, you mean this? And they did it all perfect.
Right.
And so they're kind of like, oh, okay, ladies, that's my fault. I'll figure out how to, get a better workout for you next time.
Oh, I'm sure they put a majority of the athletes to shame with their flexibility and their stability and their balance.
Oh, and the range of motion, yes.
Yeah. Well, and that's just it too. So when we look at the high school athlete, there's a lot of things, these days we talk about the kids, how they're so addicted to electronics and their iPads and their iPhones. How do you as a coach combat that? Is there a rule at school where you cannot have your cell phone out, or when they walk in your weight room, is it all cell phones in the corner of the room? How do you monitor that?
I really don't have to worry about that much because they know when they're in the room, it's to work. And that's what we talk about. You're in here to work. Outside, what you do is what you do, but let's get after it. And so really, it's not that big of a deal.
It doesn't create too much of a problem. Now, with that, are you seeing now? We all talk about the different generations. Some generations work hard, some are more entitled. What do you find as a coach? Have you seen a trend or a change, or is that kind of hype and overrated where we sit there and we categorize, well, this generation's more entitled? What do you find as a coach? You see these athletes year in and year out.
I don't know if it's a generation or if it's because I get to see the sports, but a lot of times the kids that are drawn to the sport are drawn to the sport for a reason. Whether it's their mentality or their personality, I don't know. But they're there because they want to play and they want to work hard. So, I know that they talk about the different things, the entitlement, some of those kind of things out in the school. But once they hit that court, once they're on that mat, once they're on that field, it's a little bit different attitude. They know that, look, if I want to compete, this is what I'm going to have to do. So for me, I don't get to see that, or I don't see that as much, I guess I should say.
Okay, fair enough. So, going back to the LTAD model we talked about earlier, when you look at your freshman athletes all the way through your senior athletes, and what you've done maybe for the last 15, 20 years, have you seen a decrease in three-sport athletes?
Oh, tremendously. And there's, besides the LTAD model, one of the things that comes out, and it came out of Europe first, it's called physical literacy. And physical literacy simply means, can you do more than one thing? Physical literacy changes over time. Now, I'm going to kind of pick on you with your age. When you were younger, you always wanted to throw a lot of weight around. But as you get older, and the kids are always like, you know, Coach, how much do you bench? I always tell them, my goal, I take off my shirt, I want to make sure that I don't get rolled back into the water. You know, I'm here to lift for fun. I'm not here to try to impress anything. So when we talk about physical literacy, could you go from playing a pickup game of basketball into maybe just go throwing the lacrosse ball around? Or maybe you're going to go hit some balls at the batting cage. Or maybe go out and do some golfing. So physical literacy, when we really stress that, is you have to be able to do many different things. I learned to rollerblade about, what, 5, 6 years ago. Yeah. And that's, you know, having the balance, the confidence of, okay, I can stand on one leg and not kill myself. Yeah, I wear all the pads and everything, but...
right. Helmet for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely that.
Well, that's just it. I think a lot of times, we get locked into our zone of what we do day in and day out, and to reteach different neuromotor pathways and patterns is critical for raising that ceiling of athletic development, where I think a lot of our athletes now, we've talked about, is they shunt their athletic ability because their athletic ceiling is so short now. It's not as high. So keeping those 3-sport athletes, I mean, I remember I was a marginal athlete in high school. However, I was still a 3-sport athlete across the board, and I think it helped give me a broader, better foundation to excel in one versus the other.
Well, and being the 3-sport athlete, if you're a 1-sport athlete, you're doing the same thing over and over. You're doing that all the time. You're going to start getting repetitive injuries. And that's one of the problems that they're starting to see, is why are these kids having Tommy John injuries, surgeries? Why are these kids tearing their shoulders up, rotator cuffs are blowing out? Why are they having some of these? And then you look at what they do. Well, it's not hard to figure out. You're doing the same thing over and over. Yeah. Too much of the repetitive.
Exactly. And going on that repetitive aspect, how do you, as the high school coach, how do you help manage volume, overtraining, over-competing with club sports?
That's one of those that, as a school, we agreed, and I've been lucky because as a Ponderosa High School before this, all the coaches agreed you want to share your athletes. The talent pool isn't that deep, so you need to make sure that you're sharing all your athletes. And that's a big one that coaches encourage it. Look, it's springtime. Try baseball. If you're not good at baseball, there's track, there's lacrosse, there's something else that you can do. So the coaches get together and they try to keep the kids at school, and they try to keep them doing as many different sports. Yes, you're going to have those kids playing club sports, and we actually have some kids that they will play club sports and they'll still play a different high school sport besides the club sport.
You know, I've run into that a lot, where I'll have a kid who's in track season and he's still playing club basketball, which, you know, at the end of the day, you pay attention to all the pounding and all the pounding they get from the basketball, and then all the pounding they get from track and field. So when they come in with me, I try to just manage all the stress they're getting, you know, providing them with, you know, good stability work, good mobility work, good myofascial work. But again, at the end of the day, you've got to pick and choose what you're going to do with your athletes. So I know that's part of your job, is how do you're the guy in the middle who's trying to balance everything. So hats off to you, because that's a massive role.
Thank you.
Well, Patrick, I think that's all I've got for questions for today. I want to thank you for coming in and giving, you know, our viewers a real good insight to what it is that you do as a high school strength and conditioning coach. And you've been doing it for how many years now?
28 years I've been teaching and coaching.
Wow. So you've got a lot of experience and you've seen so much. So thank you for just sharing a little bit of the iceberg with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick.